So like Rachel said, I'm the lead of the Valley chapter of Raptors Are the Solution. So tonight I'm going to be talking about, we only have one problem. I can't, there we go. We're talking about rodenticides, how they affect non-target species, the ecological role of raptors. Then we'll talk about Raptors Are the Solution as an organization. Then move on to our chapter here in the Valley. Valley Raptors Are the Solution. So our Valley rats, and how you guys can be involved. And then helping one another with some rodent issues. So it looks like this is moving forward on its own here. Let me just start with this presentation with a quote from an article. And keep in mind, this was from decades ago. And it starts by reading, I think we all recognize this isn't really the case anymore. Scientists may have thought this way decades ago. And remember, this is being said decades ago. But the issue of rodenticide use isn't limited to rural areas because rural applications of anticoagulants, I'm not sure, and we're on automatic and I don't know why, expose a greater diversity of non-target wildlife to potential hazards of both primary poisoning and secondary poisoning. So this was realized some time ago. So here we have a beautiful photograph here of this nice red-tailed hawk. Looks like a female, could be wrong though. Classic for the valley, right? Sitting on a phone pole, waiting for lunch to run by. Looks like a woodpecker has been involved with this pole as well, not for sure though. And this says the wild is not away somewhere. Wildlife are among us everywhere. And isn't that true? And that always makes me think of a poster, and maybe some of you have seen it. It's a forest setting with a road running through the forest, and then there's a deer on that road. And what it says is that the deer is not crossing the road, but the road is crossing the forest. And I hope that we can all keep that in mind when we're thinking about wildlife and our place living with them. Here's just a cute photograph for you of Mama and Daddy barn owl. Not exactly sure where this is. We can see some beams. It might be close to a palm tree. Any of you that have palm trees in your yard or close to palm trees know that barn owls love to nest in them. And then when we have a big windstorm, then the fledglings or the nestlings are blown out of the nest. And then our wildlife rehabilitators come into play. So if we have any wildlife rehabilitators on with us tonight, thank you, and you know what I mean. So next we have a red-shouldered hawk. This kid is sitting on top of the roof of the Interpretive Center at the Arcata Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary. So this is just showing that here we have this interpretive center at the Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary, and our red-shouldered hawk is using this as a perch to look for some lunch. Just showing how maybe humans and wildlife can maybe cohabitate. Here's a picture this time of a mammal. Obviously, this is a mountain lion. And it's taken from the inside of a building. You can see the reflection from the window, so that was a smart move on that part. So this is another species that we need to live together with. And then here we have our marsh or our harrier hawk carrying lunch somewhere. We can see, or dinner or breakfast, but we can see in the background here that this hawk is flying around humans, isn't it? We've got windows or doors in the background. I want to say, when we really think about raptors, we think about them as being revered as representatives of strength, right? And some power and freedom as well. Because if we think about our bald eagle, that is our national bird. But really, life for raptors is pretty tough out there, isn't it? So as birders, we know there's different thoughts, anywhere from 50 to 80% of birds don't make it through their raptors don't make it through their first year. So it's really tough. I mean, think about if you had to stand on top of a phone pole and wait for something to go running by and then fly down and catch it for a meal, taking in all of the weather as well. It's pretty tough out there for raptors. And so then we add to that mix rat poison. And so our raptors are not immune to that at all. And because our raptors are thought of as apex predators, they really serve as indicator species. So meaning the health and the presence or the absence and abundance of raptors can signal a change in the biological condition of a particular ecosystem. So we're going to start off by talking about rodenticides. Currently, rodenticides are registered for use in most of the states, and they fall into 3 categories. So let's talk about those categories to begin with. So the first one are non-anticoagulant rodenticides. And I'm going to admit right now that I cannot pronounce most of these poison names. So I've given them some abbreviations so I don't massacre them. But first we're talking about non-anticoagulants, rodenticides. So first is bromethylene. What this is a neurotoxin. It eventually results in paralysis and death. And sometimes I have seen, I'm a veterinary technician, and I've seen in emergency medicine some animals that have come in that have got into this. And really to say there's really not an antidote for this. So this can be a very horrible, lethal poison. The next one we have cholecalciferol. Possibly. This is really one of the most dangerous rodent poisons on the market right now. Excuse me. So what this does is cause a vitamin D3 overdose. And what it results in is increased levels of calcium in the bloodstream. So this can cause 3 different things. First, acute kidney failure. Then also cardiovascular abnormalities and tissue mineralization. Excuse me, I do have a cough, I apologize. So if we think about the cardiovascular system as the highway in the body, right? Anything that has to get anywhere for the most part goes through the cardiovascular system. So we've got oxygen and nutrients going out, and we have waste coming back. If our kidneys aren't working, then we can't, because the kidneys are our filters. If they can't filter that blood, we can't remove the waste. So there's waste buildup. And then we have a calcium buildup as well. And our tissues are mineralizing. So they can't accept that oxygen and those nutrients or get rid of waste. So this is a really potent, dangerous poison. And then lastly, we have zinc phosphide. So what this one does is changes into a phosphine gas when it's ingested. And then what happens is it blocks the cells from making energy. And then eventually those cells die. So as we know, our whole body is made up of cells of one type or another. So this is a very lethal rodenticide as well. So once again, these are non-anticoagulant rodenticides. Excuse me. So the second type that we have is called a first generation anticoagulant rodenticide. So these rodenticides were made to cause anticoagulant. Thinking about a coagulant is the clotting of the blood. So we have 3 different types here. I'm going to call the first one chloro and the second one difa, and then we have warfarin that we are all familiar with. The second one there, difa, this one is used in ground squirrel bait. So just keep that in mind as we continue on through this presentation. So these first generation anticoagulant rodenticides, these take multiple doses to take their lethal effect. So the animal is going to have to continue back and eat more of this until it then completely does its job. So let's move on. Whoops, pardon me. Let's move on to the third type. These are second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. And these emerged because rats became resistant to warfarin. And so because of that, they had to introduce a new group of rodenticides. So we have these listed here, Brodificum, Broma, I'll call it Broman, and then a Defin, and then a Defith. I'm sorry about the pronunciation. But if we think about these are more potent. These only take a single dose to have a lethal effect. So this was passed in 2014, keeping in mind these are called the single dose. So just a review of how an anticoagulant works. So in the body, most clotting factors are synthesized almost exclusively in the liver. So clotting factors basically is what helps our blood clot in case of injury and so on. Also synthesized in the, or made in the liver, is an enzyme that's necessary for recycling vitamin K. Vitamin K is essential for blood clotting. So if you have an animal that has ingested, say your dog has ingested some type of bait, they'll go to the veterinary hospital, we'll induce vomiting to get out of the system within the stomach. And then more than likely, we're going to send home vitamin K to give it home. So we can help with that clotting process. But these anticoagulants, they stop that or inhibit that process. So we have internal bleeding that ensues after being exposed to enough of this anticoagulant. So we know that the first generation takes multiple doses, but that second generation, for the most part, is a single dose. So unfortunately, this picture here is of a red-tailed hawk that was a secondary poison to an anticoagulant. So stopping the blood from clotting. We can see that there's blood coming from the nares. Not real sure if that's blood coming from the eye, but I think it's really around the mouth. So this bird succumbed to anticoagulant bait poisoning. So to continue on how the anticoagulant works, a rodent goes in the bait box and consumes the poisoned bait. There's a delay, the bait's going to be ingested, and then there's an appearance of overt symptoms. So we're thinking about the cardiovascular system and then this anticoagulant. And if we think about how rodents travel, they can get through a hole or a small opening if their head will make it through, right? So if their head goes through, their body will go through. But as they travel through that very small space, they could become poisoned. I'm sorry, poisoned. They are already poisoned, but they could become bruised. So that bruising is going to cause some internal bleeding. And we wouldn't really see that at first, but how that's going to affect this rodent is to slow them down because they have some internal bleeding. So this cardiovascular system can't get out and perfuse the tissues with that oxygen and those nutrients and bring back that waste. So those rodents are going to start moving a lot slower, which will give more opportunity for raptors to catch them. So in the meantime, as this is, these guys are digesting this bait, they're going back and forth depending on what type of bait that it is, and they become easy targets for predators. So we can see this beautiful red-tailed hawk here that is a first-year bird. You can tell by that tail, right? But this guy is banded, or girl, not sure. And then we see that it has a mouse there for a meal. But they have done some studies with ferruginous hawks and have seen that these ferruginous hawks prey on these potentially poisoned rodents, because as we just talked about, this prey is slowing down, right? Because their system is not working as well, but we may not see that on the outside. So behavior of favoring poisoned prey because increased raptor encounters with these poisoned animals. They're smart, right? They're opportunistic. They try to save energy. They don't want to be chasing rabbits around all the time if they don't have to. They can just sit at Safeway and look at the bait boxes like this particular red-tailed hawk right here. So this red-tail figured out that rodents were coming and going from a bait box at Safeway. So it would sit here and watch this happen. This bird is also banded and pick off the rodents. We know they're moving slower because we've talked about that already. Then rats, so Raptors Are the Solution, went in and talked to the manager of the Safeway store, and they did remove the bait box. But we don't know if this bird was feeding young or not, and they'd be passing on that rodenticide to their young by feeding these affected rodents. So we're thinking about two different ways of poisoning. We have a primary poisoning, so that's direct ingestion of poison bait. So that's our rodents, right, in the bait boxes, or if we're using the green decon or whatever it is we might be using. So scavengers could pick it up as well. So thinking about maybe opossums because they clean up the earth, right? That's part of their role. Our pets, right? Our Labrador retrievers who have this great nose and love to just munch on everything could get affected. But then thinking back again about wildlife, bears eat everything. So if there's any kind of smell, bears could pick it up as well. So that's primary poisoning. And then think about secondary poisoning. So that's really what rats or Raptors Are the Solution is really thinking about. So ingestion of this poison from tissue of target species. So raptors are a big one, right? Because they are our rodent control. Mountain lions, we're seeing how mountain lions are affected. Bobcats for sure are being affected. Foxes, but also there's other wildlife that getting secondary poisoning. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but think about raccoons, think about passerines. We're going to talk about that as we go along. So just thinking about some sublethal effects of anticoagulant rodenticides or ARs. So we have that hemorrhaging beneath the skin, leading to intensive bruising. We talked about how that could happen, internal hemorrhaging of organs, and then possible heart failure. Because if we have that internal hemorrhaging, right, the heart's going to keep pumping even faster because it knows it's not getting the blood around to the body, but it doesn't know why. So it just keeps filling up maybe the abdominal cavity or whatever organs it might be hemorrhaging. Also, a sublethal effect could be reduced breeding success and sperm mobility. So this could be with rodents, but this could be with our secondary poisoning as well. So this is something to keep in mind. Increased vulnerability to other causes of death, such as vehicular collisions and predation. So talking about vehicular collisions, we know that these rodenticides are slowing down the animals. They may be lethargic. We're going to talk about it in a second. And so they're moving slower. They can't get out of the way of the car. They don't see the car and so on. And they can't get out of the way of predators as well because of this anticoagulants. Then we could have some birth defects in the way of birds, shorter wings and tails. We know how important wings are for birds or feathers and as a whole, especially for our migrating birds, right? And then bones could be more brittle, causing breakage, bills or beaks and deformities or easily breaking off, not being able to feed themselves with that happening. We also could have some chronic anemia resulting, I'm going to see if I can, oh, that helps, resulting in animals more susceptible to diseases. So we're going to talk about mange, how, and the immune system. Then here's our lethargy. So decreased food intake. So these animals are lethargic. If they have to hunt They can't go down to Costco and get a whole refrigerator full while they're not feeling very well. They have to stand on a phone pole and try to catch their prey as it flies by, or runs by. So just think about that. So decreased food intake is going to lead to decreased body weight and then probably some dehydration as well. So we've got also prenatal and neonatal transfer of these anticoagulants to the young. So in mammals with the neonatal, feeding, nursing these animals could transfer those anticoagulants. And then finally on the list here as sublethal effects is a decreased resilience to environmental stressors. So just think if they're lethargic, they can't feed themselves, they're dehydrated. We have a big heat time that goes through and a drought. These guys are even more dehydrated. And then on the other way, we have a cold snap. They can't feed themselves. They don't have enough body weight and they can't stay warm. So one other thing that I want to mention about these rodenticides is that they cause the animal to be very thirsty. And this is another thing that our predators can figure out, that these rodents are hanging around the water because it's making them thirsty. So we've known about this for a long time. This is nothing new. We just haven't brought it to the forefront to deal with it. We can see that this article is from, or this paper is from 1980. So 41 years ago, they knew that secondary poisoning of owls could be caused by anticoagulant rodenticides. And this one in New York, this study from 1971 through 1997, poisoning of wildlife with anticoagulant rodenticides in New York. So these studies have been going on for quite some time. And as a nation, and we'll see here in just a minute, around the globe, this is a definite problem. So what I wanted to share here with you, this is just a screenshot, but this is from one of these poisons, the DIFA poison, and the ecotoxicity effects it talks about is extremely toxic to bird and mammals. Do not apply this product directly to water where surface water is present or to intertidal areas because the mean high below the mean high water mark. So carefully follow labeled cautions and directions to reduce hazards to children, pets, and non-target wildlife. So unless you are sitting right by that bait box or right by the bait and catch that rodent as it comes out, there's a very good possibility that non-target wildlife is going to be affected. Reading those labeled directions is not going to really change that. This also says this product is inherently biodegradable, not determined about the bioaccumulation potential, mobility in soil hasn't been determined, and it says other adverse effects are none. So now let's talk about some non-target species. We're going to start with birds. So this study came from New Zealand. So like I said, this is a worldwide problem. This was Stewart Island robin and anticoagulant rodenticides, the Brodifacoum, detected in dead nestlings of insectivorous passerine. So these are insectivores. These are not animals that are eating, that are carnivores, right? And so we'll see in just a little bit how that could come to pass. Here's some ravens in British Columbia. So they put some bait on an island in British Columbia to eradicate some rats. Well, ravens are a very smart bird, as we all know, and they actually did eat some poison from the trap and then also scavenged on these poisoned rat carcasses. So unfortunately, there was 20 ravens found dead due to this poisoning in 1 year. And so that's the birds that we knew about. But what about the birds that replicated and their offspring? What happened to those as well? And as you can see, this study was in 1997. So this is talking about northern spotted owls and barred owls in remote forest lands in northwestern California. So 70% of northern spotted owls in the Northwest tested positive for anticoagulant rodenticides. This was a study from 2018. And what this showed was evidence of food web contamination. And I think what I find really interesting about this, it says barred owls on remote forest lands in northwestern California. And then in that same study with barred owls, and 40% of barred owls in northwestern California tested positive for these ARs as well. So as we travel through here, we'll see how this might have come to pass. So this poster that we have here is available to everyone. I want to share that on Raptors Are the Solution website. We have a lot of educational items for you to print out and share. So thinking about prodifocome was lethal to 5 of 6 barn owls. The deafen produced sublethal hemorrhaging. So after 6 days of exposure, so that's a very short time frame. And the DIFA was lethal to great horned and northern saw-whets. Again, this was from 1980. So this, again, 41 years ago, secondary poisoning of owls by anticoagulant rodenticides. Here's our beautiful American kestrel. So thinking about conversion of prothrombin to thrombin. So thrombin is part of the coagulation cascade of blood clotting. So during this conversion, during coagulation was delayed in prodifocome exposed kestrels. Prodifocome may have prolonged effects that increase the toxicity of subsequent AR exposure. Here's a beautiful picture of an American kestrel with some type of rodent meal. If there's anyone there that knows those toes and what kind of animal that might be, write it in the chat. I'd love to hear what you think that it is. But what I wanted to talk about here is how we know that American kestrel numbers are declining, and people are looking into that. If there's anyone here tonight that has any results from any studies, please share that, put it in the chat or a link to that study. I'd really like to read about it. And then continuing with our American kestrels, this is actually a barn owl box on one of the ranches that Bill Ralph does barn owl box monitoring on. I'm not sure if Bill's on the call tonight or not, but I was lucky enough to help Bill this summer with his barn owl box monitoring. It was a blast. I learned so much, but what I wanted to show you was how he takes a modification to this barn owl box. So he makes that white piece there, makes the hole smaller so the kestrels can get in, but it's so small that the barn owls can't get in. So here we have in the picture on the right is the result of the eggs that were laid in there, and they just look right up at you, except for that little younger one, and they're just as cute as they can be. So I just wanted to share that with you. More bird non-target species. So we talked about opossums are the one of the cleaners of the earth, right? That's their job. Well, so are turkey vultures, aren't they? They are an important part of the ecosystem of cleaning up, and they eat carrion. And so what are we doing with, we're providing them with carrion from these bait boxes with these animals that have this rodenticide poisoning in them. So if this particular bird here, this vulture, you can see from the necropsy, I apologize if this is too graphic for some of you, but this shows the hemorrhaging that was inside this bird. And then you can see the bird's head there, what a light color it was, almost white, because it couldn't get that perfusion from the blood to carry oxygen and nutrients because it was bleeding out on the inside. So the levels in this particular bird upon necropsy was 0.57 parts per million in the liver. 0.01 parts per million of this brotificome has been associated with mortality in raptors. So this guy had been doing his job, cleaning up the earth, and unfortunately, this is the demise it met. So here we are in another country now. This is Bubak owls in Western Australia. I'm hoping pronouncing that correctly. So they were found dead or seriously ill, and they tested positive for anticoagulant rodenticides. And what they found in their study, which really makes perfect sense, is the closer that these birds were to human habitats, the more rodenticides they had in their system because of our bait boxes and different things like that. And this was in 2018. Isn't that a beautiful bird? I love those eyes, it's so pretty. Okay, on to mammals. So this is the famous P22. This picture was highlighted on National Geographic. California Department of Fish and Wildlife does a lot of studies in California mountain lions. And what they found as far as rodenticides go, across 37 counties, 94.5% of these lions had rodenticides. 70% of them were exposed to first and second generation ARs. And then they actually found a fetus that tested positive for rodenticide exposure. So I'm not sure what year this picture was taken, but now we see P22 in March of 2014, where he was recaptured, or she. This animal was recaptured to replace the batteries and the tracking device. So when they came across P22 covered in mange, and this has to do with the rodenticide decrease in the immunity. And once that happens, then mange can take effect and consume the outside of an animal. So blood tests confirmed exposure to these rodenticides in this animal, P22. And this animal, from what I understand, was treated for these mange and then released back out to the wild. Bobcats. So bobcats have been a lot in the news lately as far as having mange. 90% of bobcats in Santa Monica Mountains tested positive for this rodenticide exposure. And so what happens is these ARs cause a dramatic change to gene expression that relates to their skin and immune system. And then that brings the mange or the ectoparasite. So around Santa Cruz, I've seen a lot of reports of bobcats with mange. I saw a video of a very sick, skinny bobcat with mange walking through a nursery, actually. And I thought, gee, if they had bait boxes there, we know that this rodenticide slows down this prey. And so this is easy catch for the bobcat, but unfortunately, it's just a death sentence. Here we have a San Joaquin kit fox, and we know these guys are endangered. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife necropsy report says the probable cause of death was anticoagulant. We can see here on the right with the mouth that the gums are very pale. The tongue is as well. They should be a nice pink color. That has to do with lack of perfusion, doesn't it? Because when we look at this left-hand picture, upon necropsy, we can see the hemorrhage on the inside. So the body was not able to perfuse and get that oxygen around. And again, the animal died, of course. Now, fishers are a pretty interesting story. 79% of Pacific fishers tested positive for rodenticide exposure. 4 fisher deaths were directly related. Fishers were also the first documented neonatal transfer of ARs to a fisher kit. So how these are up in Northern California for the most part. And I think this might relate to those spotted owls and those barred owls because the illegal marijuana operations that are going on up in Northern California, they have a lot of bait boxes that they use, and not just the bait boxes, but the classic decon and everything around to keep rodents out. We know that fishers are carnivores. So unfortunately, because of this situation, and may be related, I don't know, to that barred owl and the spotted owl as well. And then finally on our mammals, here's our bear. This is not the bear that had the necropsy done, but we know bears are omnivores. They eat everything from insects to berries to, they love to get in our trash cans. So this particular bear from 2015 had 1.3 parts per million of the brodifacoum. Liver concentrations of 0.1 to 0.2 parts per million are the intoxication in mammals. So this was part of the necropsy report. There's the number there from 2015. How about reptiles? So this report is actually from Australia. Frequent exposure is what they determined, 91% in dugates, which is a rodent predator, so that makes sense. 60% in bobtails, these are omnivores, and then 45% in tiger snakes, which are frog predators. So this says toxic time bombs, frequent detection of anticoagulant rodenticides in urban reptiles at multiple trophic levels. So once again, in Australia, they're seeing this in their urban animals around. We saw those owls earlier. This one's from Germany. First evidence of anticoagulant rodenticides in fish and suspended particulate matter, spatial and temporal distribution in German freshwater aquatics. 88% of samples tested positive for anticoagulant rodenticides, and then 8 anticoagulant rodenticides, first and second generation, found in livers of common beam and suspended particulate matter. So when I saw this, I really thought, and I'm not sure, and maybe somebody can put this in the chat too, I thought about our bass fish, right? Sometimes, and I think I've seen videos of bass fish that eat rodents. So then thinking about how these rodenticides make our animals thirsty, they're going to go to water, and maybe one time a bass has jumped up there and grabbed a rodent that was suffering from rodenticide poisoning. So something to think about when you're out there fishing for bass. Invertebrates as well. So brodifacoum detected in 90% of slugs after application of bait in a field study. This was from 2018. So this made me think about my yard in particular. My front yard, I have some slugs, but I don't use bait at all. And I have the wild turkeys. I live up in the Oakhurst area, and I have wild turkeys that travel through and keep the lawn mowed and the slugs down and such. But I have in my backyard that's fenced, I have a slug explosion going on. One night I walked back there to look at the full moon, and boy, I couldn't believe the slugs in there. So the early morning passerines are in there trying to help out, but they're just not really doing the job, and that's okay. But what it made me think about was, what if I had a bait box or something like that to get rid of, or if we're closer into town where there might be bait boxes where there are turkeys. Slugs and snails have been seen in bait boxes. So the turkeys eat the slugs, and we know what happens. It slows down the animal, and then this turkey could be preyed upon by the mountain lion, and so on. So from this one little slug, or it would probably take quite a few, but we can see how this progresses. And so this takes us to the snails and the banana slugs. It also made banana slugs in the Santa Cruz area, made me think of all those bobcats and how that could have progressed. Mollusks have also tested positive. And I think this one's a really cool one, or interesting, I should say, blowfly larva. So this is a carrion insect tested positive for brodifacoum residues. So we have this lethal rodenticide, our rodents die, and then the blowfly larva feeds on that rodent, because that's what they do, and then they become infected with the rodenticide. All right, non-target species were still on invertebrates. A lab study found that broma in soil can be accumulated in earthworms. So this led me directly to thinking about the ground squirrels, because we think it's nice and fluffy where we say that the bait that we give the ground squirrels kills them and they stay in their hole and die. So then it doesn't transfer that rodenticide. If we're sure that that's 100% of those squirrels, I'm not sure either. But what I thought about with these worms is if these worms that maybe somehow encounter this decomposing squirrel in its hole, make its way back up to in a big rain or something, I don't know how, and then a bird or an opossum, or how about a raccoon digs them up and eats them, that can be passed on. Okay, so how about the ecological role of raptors? So raptors play an important ecological role by controlling populations of rodents and other small mammals, as well as consuming carrion. So we saw what happened with the vulture that consumed too much carrion that had the lethal rodenticide in it, but raptors are rodent control. And if we would just keep that in mind, as we think about trying to control rodents, this shows us the proof right here that it's in the pellet, right? So if this looks like maybe a barn owl box was cleaned out, I'm not sure about that, but we can see all these pellets, right? So if you've ever come across a pellet or in science class and so on, and you open these up, it's so cool to see all these little tiny bones, like these little tiny femurs in these pellets. That just proves to us that these raptors are eating all these rodents. And then on the right-hand side here, our great horned owl is giving us a demonstration that yes, those pellets did come from an owl, and this is how we expel it. So a couple of studies just to prove more that raptors are rodent control. In the Napa Valley, they had a barn owl breeding season study go on. Average 3.62 chicks fledged in Napa Valley, an average of 170.2 prey deliveries per barn owl chick. So let's think about that for a second. For the most part of the beginning, it's the male that does the feeding. So that guy's busy taking rodents back to feed mama and the babies, right? She's incubating eggs, staying with the little nestlings until they can thermoregulate. So he's a busy guy. We can't just order pizza, right? We've got to get these rodents. So what they determined was 3,466 rodents were removed by one barn owl family in a full year. So just think about that. That is a lot of rodents. They are rodent control. Think about this study says how hundreds of boxes are spread through. They're talking about Napa Valley, but think about our valley. Think about the central San Joaquin Valley and all the barn owl boxes that are spread out in this area for rodent control. And then also think about a red-shouldered hawk can consume at least 30 rodents per month. So that's a big help, right? And that's about one a day. We know that red shoulders also eat invertebrates and other things as well. And they also can pick up rodenticides through there. But this is just talking about these 30 rodents per month. I do want to add that with the Napa Valley barn owl study, Bill Ralph was sharing with me one of the ranches that he's on, and the supervisor of that ranch shared with him, and if Bill's on tonight, he can add to that if he wants to, but how after adding all those barn owls to this one particular fig orchard, how he felt like it was actually a healthier orchard once the barn owls came into play. Okay, raptors are the solution. We know that. This is the name of our group. It was co-founded in 2011 by Lisa Owens-Biani and Alan Fish. So how this all started, we can see this Cooper's hawk here with these these are not fledglings, but nestlings. And this is in Lisa's neighborhood. All of the neighbors watched this wonderful thing happen with feeding these fledglings, and unfortunately are these nestlings now, but they became fledglings, and unfortunately they did die for rodenticide poisoning from what the parents were feeding them. So they said, we've got to do something about this. So they made this group with a mission to educate people about the ecological role of raptors and work to eliminate toxic rodenticides from the food web to prevent poisoning of wildlife, pets, and children. So we do a couple things with Raptors Are the Solution, multi-pronged strategy, which is one, public education and partnerships. So tonight, Fresno Audubon was nice enough to invite me here tonight to talk about rats, legislation, and then litigation as well. Look at that owl, isn't that beautiful? So outreach and education. So first of all, we have all these billboards all over the state, and there's even some over on the East Coast. We have a couple chapters over there. So you may see these around. We don't have any in the Central Valley yet, so I'm hoping sometime soon. But this particular one is in Paso Robles, and it was sponsored by Pacific Wildlife Care Center and the Morro Coast Audubon Society. You'll also see them on city buses and the BART stations, bus stops all over the place. So that's how we get our name out there. And then we have a rats activist toolkit. So these people in this picture are in Seattle. What they do, they pick like a radius of 1 mile or so, and they go to different establishments and they look for bait boxes. And we're going to talk about the importance of that in a minute. But what we have with rats is an app. And so this app, when you come across a bait box, you take a picture of it. What it will do is record the GPS. You enter in whatever poison it is in that box. It should have a label on it, and then that information goes to a database. As far as litigation goes, in 2017, RATS sent official requests to the California Department of Pesticide Regulation to reevaluate the direct and cumulative effects of first and second generation ARs. Well, nothing really happened. So then in 2018, RATS filed a lawsuit pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act for failing to adequately analyze the impacts of ARs on California wildlife. So what this really did was put this back, the burden of proof back on the CADPR to prove that. And so what we're really concentrating on in that was those second generation ARs. Those are the ones that are a 1-dose lethal. So in legislation, we have the AB 1788, which is the California Ecosystems Protection Act. Here we have this poster in a bus stop with a burrowing owl. And then this is another one of those posters or handouts that you can get for free on our website. So what is the California Ecosystems Protection Act? What it does has placed a moratorium on those second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. So those are those 1-dose lethal until the California Department of Pesticide Regulation finishes that reevaluation process and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife determines they do not result in significant adverse effects to non-targeted wildlife. So public health and agricultural exemptions are included in this bill. So if you have a special permit, you may be able to use these first generation anticoagulants. So this passed in September of 2020. It was super exciting. Everyone was up at the Capitol on the steps in Sacramento, and then the governor signed it and it went into effect on January 1st of 2021. I see that I'm getting close on time, so I'm going to try to get through here. How did AB 1788 get passed? It took years, attempts of legislation, raptors to mountain lions. Then we had that lawsuit in 2018. And then AB 1788. So it's up to DPR to prove that and for the state to agree. So how can we help? By just looking at these bait boxes. So they're everywhere. If you go to any basic establishment, if you look real close, you're going to see those black bait boxes. Walk right up to them. It's not illegal to do so. You can take a look at what's inside. So if you see one of those second generation anticoagulants, then you can report it. What you have to do is take a photo of the label, the establishment, the address, and the date. And then you turn it into to your agriculture commission. Also, these bait boxes require a label. So if they don't have a label, that's reportable as well. Sometimes they get turned upside down. So if you feel uncomfortable doing that, you can take a look and see if that label's underneath. So you can also report those violations to the California Department of Pesticide Regulation. And if it was me, I would report to both, because the DPR are really the organization that's trying to prove that these are okay. So here I wanted to show that list of those second generation anticoagulants for you. So this is what we're looking for that should not be in these bait boxes. So I just happened to be in Taco Bell drive-thru today in Oakhurst. And what did I see? I saw a bait box. So I got out while I was waiting for my order, and I took this picture of the bait box. Then I tried to crop it so we could see what was in it. It's a little bit hard to see, but we can see the pest control company. All they have mentioned on here is a caution. They don't have a warning. They don't even have danger that it's poison on there. So what the poison is that's in it is the cholecalciferol. This is the vitamin D3 overdose that causes that acute kidney failure and that type of thing. And as I was sitting there waiting for my order, because frankly it took them forever today, what did I hear? What do we see at every fast food restaurant that we go to are ravens, right? Waiting for a free French fry or a tortilla chip or whatever. And I really thought about that. I thought, here are these guys talking about the ravens. They're all over the place. And then we have these bait boxes right here. Ravens have no problem with picking up a rodent and having a meal. So I thought that was a little concerning. So here are your ag commissioners. If you, where you want to report it, I don't know what happened there, is where in the county where the box was, not necessarily where you live. So we have Fresno County Ag Commissioner. I have this information for you here. I know this is being recorded, so hopefully you can check in with this. You can Google it. And then the CDPR enforcement, so is a Central California regional office. So this is in Clovis, and here is the information here. Then I also found some other district offices for Fresno County, but I would suggest going to the main Fresno County office. And then Madera County Ag Commissioner, Rusty Landsberger, and Mariposa County, Monica Nielsen. And here's that information. I do want to say, if you come across one of those boxes with that second generation, and you take the picture and the whole thing, but you just don't feel okay about reporting it, send it to me. I don't have a problem with it. I will report it for you. I just need that information. All right, so Valley Raptors, what can we do? Outreach and education, social media. You will find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. We want to reduce the use and sale of rodenticides in our community. Uh-oh, I've got 2 minutes. We want to report those bait boxes. Preventing rodent issues. This is another poster that you can find on our website. Here's some good information. If you have yourself or a neighbor that's complaining about all these rodents around, here's some things that you can do. One of the things that I really want to point out is don't leave pet food out. Besides rodents, you're going to feed stray cats and raccoons. Those two species carries things that we don't want our pets to get. Way to address the rodent issue without using poison. Use some snap traps or electric traps. Just make sure you put it out of the way so your dog doesn't place their nose in it. Do not use glue traps. Birds get caught in those. Those are really not cool. Sprinkle cayenne pepper on rat trails. Barn owl nest boxes. We know how many they eat in a year, 3,400. What else could you ask for? Here's a perfect example. Again, on Out with Bill Ralph, we came across this barn owl box with all these rodents in it. This is just proof that barn owls are rodent control. I don't think this box was successful. You can see those eggs are all spread out, but what I really wanted to show you was the rodents in there. So be proactive rather than reactive. Here is my contact, brats21@gmail.com. Please contact me if you have any questions or you'd like me to come speak or you want to do some tabling. I'm happy to help you with that. Here is our website. Literature cited. If we weren't for all these people, we wouldn't have all this great information. So thank you to all these folk. Here is a beautiful picture of a barn owl taken out once again in the fig orchards that Bill Ralph is monitoring. I want to thank all these people for their beautiful photos. Jamie Carlino and Lisa Owens Biani for the presentation help. And once again to Bill Ralph for Barn Owl Box Adventures. So I think I'm just about out of time. I've used every minute, but I really want to thank you for this time. It was really a pleasure. Now I'm not sure what to do from here.
All right, I will go ahead and take over.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. What we're going to do now is we're going to get into the chat and read off some questions that people have typed in there. And for anyone who has questions and has not yet typed them in, feel free to go ahead and do so now. So I'm going to start off with the first question, and Karen Cobb would like to know how coyotes are being impacted by the use of rodenticides.
That's an excellent question. That's another one of those prey species that are opportunistic, aren't they? Aren't all predators, predator species. So they are also being very effective. We haven't seen as much mange reported with coyotes as we have with, say, bobcats, but they're certainly being affected by the rodenticides. Good question.
Okay, so the next question comes from Ron Martin, and you did kind of touch on this, but I think he's asking, I guess, more broadly, can we outlaw rodenticides?
You know, it's that would be the dream, wouldn't it, to outlaw them? And Rats is working hard just to get legislature to recognize that it is really important poison that affects all species. So that would be the dream to do that. If it happens, that would be great. I don't know how long it'll actually take in the legislature, but good question.
Okay, and the next question is also from Ron Martin, and he's wanting to know, are rat poisons and boxes out of stores? I'm guessing, I guess he wants to know, like, where they're purchased from.
Well, you can buy it at a lot of, like, say, Walmart and Home Depot, Lowe's, places like that sell it. Ag supply places sell rodenticide. I don't know if you can actually buy it in, say, Vons or Safeway, any place like that, but it's commonly a common thing that you can purchase.
Okay, and the next question also from Ron is, have children been tested for rodenticide?
Not that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. So I can't answer the question if they have or they have not, just not aware.